First of all, thank you very much for introducing me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today's forum is a very important event as it unites all the stakeholders to one goal, the decarbonization of the Ukrainian steel industry. I personally consider this topic at the top priority for the development of the steel industry in the future, and especially in the energy generation, which is a strong link between these two activities. The actual reason for this development, the increase of the carbon use, is the increase of the population in the last 150 years. Since approximately 1900, every 50 years, the population was doubled, and it still will further increase. So we cannot turn the bottom on the population increase, but we have to turn and concentrate on the steel industry and the energy, because the steel industry in the same period of time was increased by a multiplier of 10. The energy consumption by a multiplier of 20 since approximately 1900. So we have the only possibility to turn the button to improve, to decrease the CO2 emission by focusing on the steel industry and especially on the energy generation. We have to understand, however, that steel is one of the most important material, in my opinion, maybe the most important material, which gained vast significance for the society because it's on top of most of the value-added chains in a number of industrial sectors, and which influence overall macro development of the macroeconomy very much. Steel consumption is a clear indicator for the standard of living. Still, approximately 3 billion people on the world are living in areas with low steel consumption, below 80 kilogram per capita, and low GDP. And except Africa, which is outstanding, only shows a steel consumption of 15 kilogram per capita, and everybody knows what does this mean. That's really one of the problem area on our globe. And 2 billion people still have no access to drinking water. Approximately 1 billion people no access to electric energy. So I mean, these 3 billion people will be responsible in the future for increase of the steel production again, and the steel consumption. And I think also these 3 billion people deserve this to increase their standard of living. Once more, only chance to reach CO2 neutrality is the technology transition in the steel industry and in the energy generation, beside all other sectors like traffic, etc. My company, Horst Wiesinger Consulting, was already involved in several projects and would be pleased to support the individual companies in this issue. We are proud to be the partner of this forum to share our experience with you. This issue, decarbonization, is extremely difficult for all countries of the world and also for Ukraine. The defined CO2 reduction target of 80% by the European Union can only be met by the full commitment of the global industry, certainly of the European industry, and involving all the communities involving CO2 emitters, which I have some doubts. And I have some doubts especially concerning the global commitment. I'm seeing this with a high risk to fail if not everybody is committed. So, but however, especially, we cannot neglect the strong link, the strong connection between steel production and energy generation. The transition of the energy generation towards renewable energy will be even more important and will be the basis for the success of the decarbonization process. The steel industry is responsible for only approximately 1-digit percentage of the global CO2 emission, and the energy almost around 40% of the CO2 emission. And the Ukrainian shows a factor in the steel industry of around 15%. Carbon-free technologies represented mainly by individual solution and research projects are at the fledgling stage with different status of maturity. In 2015, the Paris Agreement on climate change was signed. Unfortunately, 2 years later, in the 17th, the US left this agreement. The parties on this Paris Agreement agreed to increase the global, to limit the increase of the global average well below 2 degrees centigrade. The European Union is moving towards the carbon-free economy in the framework of this Paris Agreement. The discussion of possible goals, targets for the reduction of CO2, however, my opinion, should be stopped, should be finished. We have to start the implementation, the transition immediately to achieve this challenging target of climate neutrality by 2015 and even 2040. Funding the decarbonization remains one of the key problems affecting the industry. For steelmaking companies, carbonization primarily means a cost in capital investment, and this would be even more valid for the energy generation. And the European Union is will partially compensate these costs as part of the European Green Deal, realizing that it is impossible to implement such global projects without public support, without governmental support. I will not go into detail now and not comment on the different extremely high investment figures which are published for funding this technology transition. One example, if you would transit the 2 days primary steel production blast furnace converter on a global basis, it would cost, based on the 2 days available figures, around 5 trillion euro, where approximately 1 to 1.2 trillion will be needed for the steel industry and the rest, 3.5, 3.8, for the energy transition. And however, I'm a strong believer we should not start such an important challenging development with such feasibility consideration. If you concentrate on the beginning on feasibility, you can kill any future development or lose the reality by applying too healthy arithmetics. The important first target for me is to reach a sustainable technical solution to introduce technologies which are defined. And if the technologies are defined, and for most alternatives they're already far advanced, we can turn, we can turn the button to reduce cost and improve the cost. Why decarbonization is a challenge, and for me it's not a challenge, it's a potential for Ukraine. First, the electric arc furnace production is below 10%, and this will be an issue for the future. The domestic steel consumption will increase because due to the low steel consumption per head in Ukraine, and this will be consequently increase the steel. The steel-related export is responsible for more than 20% of the overall Ukrainian export. Important, the availability of raw material, especially iron ore, is the basis for the competitiveness of Ukrainian steel industry, and especially the vertical integration of mining to the steel production. And one important, and it sounds strange, the equipment of Ukrainian steel and energy industry is overaged, beside all the investments you did in the recent years. And essential investment would be necessary even without decarbonization. And there's a good example from Austria. About 75 years back, after World War II, when the losing countries like Germany and Austria had to restart the business, they had to restart the steel production. But this was practically destroyed. So we had to start with new equipment, with new technology. This was the basis for our increased competitiveness in the later European Union. So it's a good example that there's a potential. And for the development of renewable energy, solar, wind, Ukraine shows a very positive precondition. So far, the climate and the location is concerned. And also the land is available, because for installing wind, solar equipment, you need land. So this is a very positive thing. What activities should be started and should be done? First, prepare a roadmap for the transition of the iron and steel operation and energy generation. I know that individual companies already work on that and far advanced, but it should be the basis. And due to the fact that there's no single solution available which fits to all, this roadmap for the steel industry should be prepared by each individual plant individually, including certain benchmarks for key success figures. And these key success factors should be the basis for comparison the individual solutions, and especially for decide the sequence of introduction, the amount of support, and very important, you need to evaluate this, the implement of pilot plans and demonstration plan. The roadmap for the energy transition, however, should be initiated by the government with coordination with the end user, like the steel industry. Start transition of the steel industry immediately after defining the roadmap, and I think for most of it, it's done. However, this transition cannot be done in one step due to the different status of the maturity and the available funds. Most likely, I believe, it will be maybe in 3 steps. Step 1, which could start immediately, and it's already ongoing. It's the application of the best available technologies for this, and especially in the blast furnace area, in this front end of the steel production. There's a potential saving between 20 and 25% of CO2 emission. And in a period of time, let's say the next 5 years. And this can start immediately. The second phase, very important, is the transformation of blast furnace converter route, the basic steel industry, to electro arc furnace direct reduction. It shows a potential of CO2 saving if you apply natural gas for the direct reduction by approximately 40%. If in the future you add hydrogen, it can be drastically improved. Time frame up to the next 10 years. On a long-term basis, a long-term development, we are looking for the breakthrough technologies like hydrogen-based technology reduction. And I have to admit, I'm qualified to talk about hydrogen reduction because some decades ago, my doctor thesis was hydrogen in the steel industry, but nobody took me serious in this time. So, but it's changed a little bit. So hydrogen-based reduction, CO2-free electric power, and very important, carbon capture and storage and use. And this even starts to become important right now. because I still believing, even with all the new technologies, solutions implemented, there's still a high possibility that we will not reach the 2050 goal. An essential portion in the energy, I believe, could still be generated by fossil fuel. And to overcome this problem, we need carbon capture and use. The saving potential for this phase is up to 100%. And the time frame, a little bit more, it's up to 25, maybe 30 years. So, but it's very important to concentrate on this. And the last item, Ukraine should concentrate to investigate in building up a cluster for the production of hydrogen for domestic use and delivery to the European Union. You may be part in this time already of this union. The structure for generating electric energy in Ukraine shows already a high percentage of CO2-free production, which will be even improved by further increase of the renewable energy production and modernize the outdated power plants. This could be, in my opinion, a strong point, a serious point for cooperation with the European Union, because also the needed pipe net is available. And you have to know that the hydrogen pipe net can transport 10 times the energy at 1/8 of the cost compared with electric transmission lines. So it's very feasible. This could, and that's why I'm a strong believer we should concentrate on this, create a win-win situation between Ukraine and the European Union, also for joint funding in the future. My conclusion, I appreciate the politics and the industry join hands, especially for providing the funds based on the importance and priority of this topic. It's not normal. It's very rarely that such a close handshake is available. However, as already mentioned, the priority for me is to find sustainable technical solution. And this demands a drastic increase of the capacity in engineering and natural science in the industry and in the universities. The creativity of our engineers and scientists will become the most important resource of a country to solve the upcoming problems. And this is even more important, in my opinion, than the funding of the projects. Thank you.